First, I want to say congratulations to a New York Times best-selling author. When you hear that and you realize that they're talking about you, does it take you a second to go, oh, wait, that's me? Or are you still awestruck every time you hear it?
I'm blown away because, like, I've been doing the music thing for so long that I know how that game works,
Yeah.
and like the Foo Fighters, we go out and play shows, we make records, we put songs on the radio. And like, I understand how the book world, no clue, like no idea at all. And both of my parents were writers. My mom was a creative writing teacher in public school. My dad was a speech writer. So like, in our family, not only the written word, but spoken word was always taken very seriously. Like at the dinner table, my mom would do these articulation drills where she would give you something to talk about for 3 minutes and you couldn't break your speech. And so being able to just write a book and then to get that first copy and drop it in her lap, like, boom, that felt great. But the bestseller thing, I just always imagined that was for, Bob Woodward and Michael Crichton and people that wrote these incredible books, So I was really surprised, and of course honored that it was on that list. So it's a trip. It's still funny.
Did you derive the same satisfaction from writing and publishing the book as you would from, let's say, writing a song or finishing an album?
Yes, it's very similar because the way I wrote this book, it all started with this Instagram page I started last year.
Yes, which we were all so stoked for.
Yeah. Right. And I only did that because I'm like, oh my God, I got nothing to do. I'm such a spaz. There's no way I can have nothing to do. So I thought, okay, this will be some sort of creative outlet and just fun for someone to read in an otherwise really dreary time. The pandemic had just hit and everyone was in their houses alone. So I started writing that. And then I thought, okay, wait, now I might actually have time to do a book. So I made a list of like 30 or 40 stories for that Instagram thing. And then I just sent it to the editor. I'm like, you pick what you want me to write. So she was assigning me like, okay, write about the car crash, write about joining Nirvana, write about Scream tours. And I was just doing them one at a time. When you're writing a story, the composition and arrangement is very much like a song. There's an intro, there's a hook, there's a verse, there's a chorus, there's a bridge, and then there's the big finish. So as you're doing story by story, it's like you're writing a bunch of songs until you get into the studio to make them into an album. So then the sequence of an album is really important, I think, to capture the listener, to have them engaged from beginning to end. There has to be arrangement and composition. So once you go into the studio and you get these songs, you realize, oh, that's the first one. Oh, that's the last one. This is what I need. This is what I don't have. And you start filling out those spaces. It's very much exactly the same. So that when we make a record and I get that first copy and I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, I can hold it in my hands. This is cool. Same thing with the book.
Okay. You just made me, I just had an epiphany while you were talking, and I'll save it for the end. And I think you answered my next question was, during the John Bonham seance of your life, there's a part that you become fascinated with, not what he's writing, but why he's writing it, like what the intention is. And I wanted to talk to you about the intention behind the book. Like, was it supposed to be autobiographical? I think you just answered that, but if you have more to say on that, I would love to hear it.
Well, first of all, I haven't read many rock biographies, The few that I've written were kind of like really informational and practical and logistical. When I kind of like the other side of things, like the emotional side of things, like where was your head at when you were doing that? Or why did you play that thing that you played? Not how, like not what microphone you used, but like why, how come you did that? And so when I was writing, there were certain things I knew what people would want me to write. Like they want to know that informational side of things, but I'm like, no, I think it's more interesting sort of to paint a much more sort of emotional picture of that stuff. So it was fun and it was easy to do, but then the challenge was deciding what to write and what not to write. Because there's so much. I was like 300 pages in and I hadn't even mentioned the Foo Fighters yet. I was like, oh my God, I've been in this band for 26 years. If I don't write about them, my guys are going to kill me. Like they're going to be so pissed that I didn't even mention that. So
wait, not to interrupt, but in the back of your mind, were you keeping some of those stories for a possible other book? Like, is it fair to say you can collect those and be like, okay, I could redirect that to a book whose intentions are different?
Yeah, I mean, like the way I look at it is every day is a story in itself. So I
Right.
could write 365 of these things a year, just like sit down and blast it out. So yeah, it was hard, man. I mean, you know, I could write an entire book about my time in Scream, like touring in vans. I could write about an entire book about my youth in Springfield, Virginia, or my time in Nirvana, or my time in Foo Fighters. And um, so it was like I sort of try to condense all of this into that one. The funniest thing was I remember when they announced that I was writing a book, my editor, she's like, it's on pre-sale. I'm like, really? Where? And she goes, like Amazon or something. So I click on it and it's like shows the cover and it's got the dimensions of the book. And then it said 384 pages. And I wasn't even like halfway done yet. I'm like, oh my God. So I start going for it. And yeah, I mean, I've never done it before, so I wasn't sure what the heck I was
Okay.
doing, but we pulled it off.
Okay, so you seem to have really easy access to these memories because you're a very detailed storyteller. Um, did you need any help going back to like get some of those details, or did you rediscover anything about those moments in your life while you were going on the journey again?
Well, both. I mean, there were times where I was writing about, touring in 1991. I'm like, wait, was it Chicago before St. Louis or was St. Louis? And I would find these like crazy websites that basically just detail every single day of Nirvana's life for those 3 years. And I would rely on that for any sort of like chronological reference.
And hope
Um,
that they're factual.
I mean, who knows? Like, listen, they probably know better than I do. But no, for the most part, when it comes to, you know, recalling any of these memories, they really are triggered by music. And so if I hear a 10cc song or a Jerry Rafferty song or a Helen Reddy song or Carly Simon, it takes me back to being like 7 years old in the 70s in Springfield, Virginia, driving around with my mom in our Ford Maverick. Like I could see it, I could smell it. It all comes back through these musical memories. And that becomes my filing cabinet. That's like how and if I hear one of like a Foo Fighters song or a Nirvana song or whatever on the radio, it instantly brings me back to the moment of like recording it, like where I was and what I was wearing. And, that day I can go back if I hear the sound.
God, I love music so much. And you too. I love you so much. I want to talk about Lenny Robinson because when I was at that part, two things struck me. Number one, when you sit down at his kit for the first time and you talk about like that perspective, but I want you to go into detail a little bit about what that perspective was. Was it powerful? Was it like, what did you see when you sat in that chair?
Okay, first of all, right. So my mother used to take me to this jazz club in DC on Sundays. Both of my parents were musical too, but my mom, she's really cool. She loves music. And so she would bring me to this jazz club. And I was like a punk rock kid. I'm like punk rock t-shirt, punk rock haircut, ripped up jeans in this jazz club in DC, where like the DC jazz scene is heavy. It's the real deal.
Yeah.
And so we would sit and watch this band every Sunday. And they had this thing that was called a Sunday jazz workshop or something. And all the local jazz musicians would come to jam with the house band. You just write your name down on a piece of paper. And it was my mom's birthday. And she's like, would you go and play with this band? And I had only learned how to play drums on my pillows in my room with like punk rock records. So, I mean, this was such an unimaginable request. I was like, there's no way. But it was her birthday, so I did it. This drummer, Lenny Robinson, he was a jazz legend in DC. Mm-hmm. I sign my name. I walk up there. The band looks at me like, oh, hell no. Like, he's going to what? And so he gives me his drum sets. And I sit down and for the first time, I see One Step Down, the club, in his perspective. And I have all these jazz enthusiasts staring at me like, all right, kid, let's see what you got. And I had nothing. And I was totally humbled. So much that I'm like, oh, wait, I'm not a drummer. What am I doing? I need to take lessons. So I asked this dude if he'd give me lessons. $30 an hour. First of all, single mom, public school teacher, doesn't make any money. We didn't even have room. We didn't even have room in the house for a drum set. So $30 to me was like, oh my God, that's like 6 lawns I have to mow, or like I was working at Shakey's Pizza, whatever. I'm like, all right. And he comes over and he sits there and he watches me play. And he's like, all right, first thing, you're holding your sticks backwards. Like, you know that, right? And I'm just like, oh. And so for 1 hour, I was just like on a practice pad going bap, 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 bap. And I'm like, at $30 an hour, it's going to take $1 million for me to learn how to play like Lenny. So I was like, nah, I'll just go back to punk rock shoes.
So it's during that part of the story that you talk about, and I think this is really important. It actually made me think, being inspired by failure. And a lot of people take failure and they say, fuck it, and they quit. But I think that being inspired by failure is like a secret sauce to success. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. I think that you should gravitate towards challenge and to prove to yourself that you can do something that not only you can't imagine doing, but others can't imagine doing either. So that's the excitement. That's the roller coaster. That's the thing. Like, you face something head on and you're like, all right, I'm going to try this. And if I get it, I get it. If not, then I'm going to try something else. And that was kind of the way I felt since I was a little kid. I was either insane or just like, I just thought anything was possible when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. And that a lot of that comes from that punk rock scene where everyone was doing it themselves. They had their own record label. They made their own t-shirts. They booked their own shows. You toured a van. I just felt like, okay, like life is available to me. I'm just going to go out and get it. And so everything that I've done, like, of course, you're nervous or you're scared to do something, but that in some ways should be the reason why you do it. And that's kind of how I roll.
You're still that kid, which is what I think the reason that, you're living your life the way that you are. I have to wrap it up pretty soon. So I'm going to ask you just a few questions, like quick ones that I want to know so bad. You say sound takes you back to places and moments. Were you listening to anything when you wrote the book? Was there like a soundtrack? Was there music that was inspiring the chapters?
Yeah, I mean, I would listen to the music that was in those chapters. So if I was, writing about Scream, I would listen to those old Scream records, or I would listen to the music I was listening to at the time. If I was writing about Led Zeppelin, I would go back to those records. So I kind of had my own playlist as I was writing. And really, like, those songs and that sound would trigger a deeper memory where I could write in detail, like more focused detail, if I hear those songs playing while I'm writing. It worked.
Okay. I loved learning that you could write songs with your teeth. And now when I look at Nirvana's Unplugged, I'm going to watch you and Kurt for that. Quickly, is this the book that you wanted to write when it's all said and done?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it was, I didn't feel like I had enough pages, but I definitely, when I hit send on the last story, I thought, I'm really glad I did that. And I can't wait to do it again.
Dave, this is a love letter to the places and the people and the moments. And it's been such a pleasure to listen to it. And it's been such an honor to talk to you. You're one of us. You love music and you make us feel like we can do anything. So it's been a fucking pleasure to speak to you. Please tell Virginia that I love her.
I will. Nicole, go stop reading and looking at the computer. Go relax.
Bye, Dave Grohl. I love you.
I love you too. Bye.
Bye.